this is the quarantine version of SLP, the Wanderlust SLP, not traveling much at this time. So I'm in Germany and you are in Florida, right?
Yes, Florida.
Yes. Okay, wanna introduce yourself to our viewers?
I'm Rachel Archambault. Some of you may know me as the PTSD SLP on Instagram. But yes, I'm in Florida and it's actually bright and sunny today.
Here was also sunny, not now because it's night.
Right.
But it was also pretty sunny and warm. Spring is coming here, so it's nice.
It feels like summer here. It's like 90 degrees. It's very hot out.
Okay, you mean Fahrenheit, because I'm like, no. Okay, that's too much.
37 degrees Celsius.
Okay, that's a lot too. Also in Celsius. Like 90 degrees, are you sure? Nice. So I want to say a few stuff about yourself. Like, you're an SLP, right?
Yes, this is my 4th year, I think, as an SLP, so I'm relatively new. I work at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, and for those of you not familiar with that, we had the shooting that happened 2 years ago on Valentine's Day, and through that event and the trauma, I've kind of found my passion to help people navigate trauma for their students and for themselves. And I'm glad that there's this huge, I guess, niche in the SLP community of people worrying about mental health and stress management and all this stuff that like was not told to us in grad school. I don't know about you, but like,
No, I don't think there's any profession. I mean, other than doctors, I don't think there's a profession that kind of prepares you for the stress that you're gonna go through.
No, not at all. It's fine. I have a friend that's an accountant, and they do stress management stuff. And I was like, they're giving them stress management, and I like, where's ours? Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's a lot of stress depending also on what what kind of people you're working with. If you're working with kids or with adults. For example, so far I've worked mostly with adults and in rehabilitation, which is also a lot. There's a lot of stress because you see people in like a bad situation after a stroke or an accident. So there's also like the whole vibe is different. That working with kids, which is like funnier or happier. I don't know how to say it. Yeah.
You know, it's funny because my last semester of grad school, we kind of all talked about where we wanted to go or where we thought we would best work. And I remember someone saying that they wanted to work with kids because they view that as happy. And the other girl who I'm very close with said, I don't want to see a kid like struggling in any way. That makes me more sad than seeing a 96-year-old post-stroke, you know? So it's so different depending on the individual. And I currently work, or I guess pre-quarantine, worked in a high school, a private practice for little kids, and a nursing home. So I work in all the areas, and I get all of the sadness.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that not everyone is able to deal with it. I remember even from clinical practice that we were just watching, still as students, and there would be kids that, for example, I remember specifically there was a kid that was, I think it was blind, and some of my classmates had started crying. I was like, what? Like, you're supposed to be the strong one. I mean, not supposed to, but we're here to help. We're not here to feel bad. So we have to support.
Right. I think it's crazy how individual that is. And it's my friend who was saying that she'd rather work with kids, had her grandmother was in a nursing home and going through dementia. So like seeing those patients reminded her of her grandma, and like that you understand why people can't work with certain populations because of their personal experiences with that, possibly.
Definitely, but it depends on how each person sees it. Because, for example, I had the same. My grandma had dementia, and that made me want to help those people instead of avoiding it because it reminded me. It made me feel better when I was helping them.
Right.
So it depends on the person.
Yeah, it does. It's a great field to have so many options of the population that you can work with.
True. That's a very good part of our profession. So you want to tell us more about your incident, or how you dealt with all that and your life before and after? Like, say whatever you feel okay with. It's fine.
Perfect. So I was just in the middle of my second year as a speech pathologist. Actually, my first year out of my clinical fellowship. So I was on my own that year. I felt really comfortable in my job. I work at a high school. So in February that year, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018, we had a previous student come in, and he killed 17 people, 3 adults, and the rest were freshmen through seniors. We had a lot of freshmen that died because the way that the building was set up, it was called the freshman building. It was kind of an overflow classroom, so there were a lot of freshmen that were in there. So my experience was, I'm sure speech pathologists know, like we're always stuck in these tiny classrooms or like closets to do speech and stuff. So I was actually in a very, very tiny old security office, and I had 3 students that ended up in there with me, as well as another teacher. And we were stuck in there for 2.5 hours, not in the building itself that had the deaths happen, but I was right outside of it. So we had a fire alarm in the morning, or a fire drill in that morning at 9:30 in the morning. And then again, 20 minutes before the end of the day, we had the fire alarm go off, and the people in my room were like, ugh, another one. Like, this is crazy. So I pushed them all out of my room. I was like, we got to do this. Come on. We go outside. And then the security in our building was not in the places that they were normally supposed to be. So something was wrong. And then when I finally looked forward, right downstairs, I could hear all the gunshots that were happening. And it was a semi-automatic rifle, so it was just like continuous. I can't even tell you like how many I heard, just because it was like constant. So that happened almost immediately. The reason that the fire alarm went off was because of the smoke coming off of the gun, and there's debates whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that the alarm went off, because half of the school didn't hear what was happening in that building and went out with the fire drill, so they got out. Half of us heard what was happening and went back to shelter in place in our room. So I was stuck in there for 2.5 hours with 1 student and 1 teacher that were in the room with me. And then we got 2 extras that were out in the hallway that I was like, come here. And so it was definitely a life-defining moment. I stayed very calm during the whole thing. It wasn't until the next morning. I think I was in shock after.
Definitely. I guess so.
It makes sense. I mean, the next morning I was sitting at breakfast and I just started crying, and I hadn't cried since then. And I slept so great that night. I was out. Half of the other staff members didn't sleep at all. And I think that was just our brains wired differently, that some of us When I'm stressed, I sleep. So I think that was my brain shutting
I'm
down.
the opposite.
Really? Okay.
I cannot.
My brain puts me to sleep. I'm out. So I think this was my brain saying, like, you've had enough today, like, go to sleep. So I slept for like 13 hours. I woke up the next morning, and then the week after that, I barely slept. Like, it was just like, I think immediately I had to sleep. But since this incident happened, it's become, we've gotten national and international attention, and we've gotten the best of the best professionally come and offer their services, whether it's like, here's this protocol that I made, here's this breathing technique that's supposed to calm you, here's this, all these ideas of people helping. I've wanted to make a page for people that this was a national trauma, like, or a public trauma that I went through, but there's trauma happening every single day,
Yeah.
all of your students' lives. And I wanted to create a place that this information that I've been getting or I've been researching to help my students is available for other people that'll understand this. And my biggest, I guess, point that I try to make on my page is just like, everyone is going through trauma, and you don't know what people are going through at home. So don't assume that you know this kid or you know the behavior, especially in our field. We're like, oh, that kid has ADD, when it's not. It's actually trauma related, and
Exactly.
you're punishing for a bad behavior when it's not a bad behavior. It's how they're coping, and we need to teach coping strategies and things like that. So that's my soapbox. That is what I try to tell everyone with my page.
That's very inspiring, actually, the fact that you took something negative and you turned it in something so positive and nice. Like, it didn't destroy you, it helped you grow, actually, to a better professional. Yeah.
It has. And I found a lot of trauma-informed education, which is nothing that I had ever heard in grad school. And I feel like it's reserved for mental health counselors or teachers, and very, I can't think of what the word is, but like progressive people, or the school districts that are like trying new things and trying to understand feelings. Like, this is what we should be doing. So I like finding out this information and posting about it. Like, this is a great thing to do, or please don't do this. This is not trauma informed. It's just like suggestions. Like, this is how it would go in our school if we did this. And we know what traumas our kids went through. If you don't know what every single moment of this kid's life is, don't attempt this.
Exactly, especially the kids you have in the school, because you're in the same school still, right?
Yes.
So you know what your kids went through, so it's easier for you to connect with them and understand them, other than having someone that doesn't know it or doesn't know the story.
It is. And also, like, I have to be aware that this is not the only trauma that they've experienced. They've experienced trauma before this and have experienced trauma after this. There's plenty of people or students that their parents are divorcing now. That's another trauma that they're going through, or some very bad things that are going at home that we don't know about. So it's one thing for our school to understand, like, they all went through this tragedy that everyone went through here. But what happens when one of my kids transfers to a school in North Florida and they say, oh, this kid is just a bad kid, and he's just not coping well, or he's triggered by the fire alarm, or you said something that is triggering him. And it's just awareness. So the trauma-informed education is just being aware that things are traumatic and to not assume.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially in our profession, it's very important to have the education of mental health and trauma, because we deal with people but we don't know exactly. So we need this information. It's like every profession should know it, but especially the people who work with other people.
That's my hope for what this Instagram page eventually becomes is I saw at ASHA this year the
article, the crying in your car. I was gonna ask your opinion on that.
On ASHA?
On the article of crying in your car.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll tell you about that. I saw the director of my grad school that was there, and he came in right when I was leaving, and I went up to him and I was like, we need to have more mental health training or classes in the graduate school program. And he just goes, you're absolutely right. And I was like, that was easy.
That was easy.
Okay. I want to reach out to these schools and say how important it is, because it was really a free-for-all when this all happened at the school, that it was like, all right, I'm finding this information from this source, this information from here, and I'm trying to see what works in the moment. And it should be a proactive thing and not retroactive. It really needs to be that. But the crying in the car was...
So for those who don't know it, I think it was last month or 2 months ago.
Maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, and ASHA, it was the Leader. I don't know exactly the name of the... Yeah.
ASHA Leader.
So there was an article about stress management, and one of the suggestions for speech therapists to go through their stress was cry in the car. It was so controversial. It was sad and funny at the same time.
Yes, it was. And I made a post about it actually, and it's one of my most popular ones. But I understand why it was divisive, I think, within the speech community, because people are like, I cry in my car all the time. And I'm like, that's great. We're not telling you not to cry. The issue that I found with the article, or just that statement of crying in your car as stress management, is it is not a stress management technique. It's exactly. Like a stress management technique is like breathing and
yoga, meditation,
anything like that. And there's tons of stress management techniques. Crying is a side effect from like being aware of your feelings. It's not the stress management technique that I had a problem with it, but I will never say like, no, you shouldn't be crying. I am all about like,
everyone should cry, and if you say that you cry, it's even stronger. Like you're even braver that you say than you admit it. It's a good thing to cry, but it's so funny when the people who are supposed to take care of you, because ASHA is the one that should take care of everything with the legislations and all that to make sure that the job is good for the SLPs. And it's those people who know, we know you're stressed, so probably it's better if you cry in your car and then continue with your day, so we don't have to do anything else.
Right. The issue that was the issue that I had with it, was that it was basically saying our jobs are completely stressful. In the school system, we know that we have huge caseloads. We have no caseload caps. We have all of these issues, and it's saying to manage that, you should cry in your car to manage the stress of these high caseloads. And I didn't find that helpful. I would much rather them work on our caseloads than tell us to cry. Like, if you could lessen my caseload a little bit, I'd be able to handle this. But I'm never ever saying like, no, you shouldn't be crying. I will tell you all day, if crying makes you feel better, do it. But it shouldn't be, I need to sit and cry in my car to manage the stress of my job.
If you need to cry every day to go through your job, maybe you should change your job, actually.
Right. But then we have all these people that love speech and love what they do, and I wouldn't want to quit. I wouldn't want to quit just because it's too much. I think that there can be some administrative level stuff that brings down our stress. But it was definitely an interesting article, and people were pretty split about it. But
it was very controversial, actually.
It was.
I was seeing it everywhere. Like, I'm not in ASHA
There
because
was.
we're not, like, in Europe. We don't have anything to do with ASHA, but I'm in many groups in Facebook and everything, and also Instagram. And I kept seeing it everywhere, like crying in your car, all the memes, and I was like,
Yeah.
"What's that?" Like, I have to read that.
Yeah. The memes were the best part of it. I loved it, but it definitely you know, I thought about, I have a big friend group of guys that are in an accounting profession, or I have a friend that's a dentist, I have a friend that's a doctor. Like, I don't think that their certifying board would recommend crying in their car if
Yeah, they
their
know their
professional.
job is stressful, but I don't think anyone's going to tell them, yeah, you can cry.
Yeah.
I think no one should say, yeah, you can cry, because you can. It's something personal. If I want to cry, I cry. No one has to tell me.
Right. Yeah. It was a mess.
So, but they fixed it after all what happened. I think they removed it, and they
They
changed
did.
it.
They did immediately. They took that sentence out, but the damage had been done.
Well, so when exactly did you realize that what you had was not just a stress or just a phase, but it was PTSD?
So I started going to therapy right after. I think so it happened in February, the middle of February. I think I went the end of March, and I've been going to the same person since then. But I went through a couple therapists before I found one that was right for me. The connection that I was looking for, or even didn't know I needed, but that was the best fit for me. I saw a psychiatrist and I saw a therapist, and the psychiatrist told me that I was depressed, and I didn't really agree with her. I was like, I'm not depressed. Like, this was a sad situation I went through, but I'm not depressed at this situation. I'm not in depression. And she kind of laughed at me. She's like, I don't think so. And she recommended medication for me to go on. And I was like, fuck, I'll try this. I ended up having like a panic attack on it. And I've never had a panic attack before.
You had panic attack after you started the medication?
For depression, yeah. So I was on it for a few days, and I wear an Apple Watch, and it told me that my heart rate was like too high, and I was very high. I was at school and I was not really doing anything. So then I went back to the therapist, I think a couple days later, and I told her I stopped it, and she goes, "Oh, well, that happens if you have anxiety, that can happen." So I was like, "Well, I told you I wasn't depressed." So I went on anxiety medication for the rest of the year, or for the rest of the school year, which was a couple months. And that helped me cope with being at school every day and just like the stressors of life that I wasn't equipped to handle at the time. The PTSD part was just, people can experience trauma and not necessarily have PTSD, post-traumatic stress. So at this school, I wouldn't really say that I would have PTSD or triggers there. It was outside of school. So when I wasn't able to, I mean, I had one here recently. I had like a panic attack. I'm at home right now, and I live in an apartment building, and they're doing construction. They set off the fire alarm the first day we went to school doing like the teletherapy stuff. So I'm sitting here on my computer talking to kids, and then the fire alarm goes off. And it was because it wasn't at school, I don't hear that fire alarm, you know, it was out of place. So for me, my hands were shaking, and I actually filmed it. I had my phone out, so I like filmed my hands shaking, and I was like, this is me being triggered by something right now. And I was able to use my strategies. I was like, I'm right here, I'm at home, I smell these things, and I was using strategies to like be okay with it. But PTSD is the way that you respond to triggers. And there's a lot of students that I have at school. We were having fire alarms that were going off anything could set them off. If it was a smell, it can be all these different things that are just so individual that you can't know everyone's trigger. But especially at our school, we knew that the fire alarms were an issue there. If I heard it there, I was fine. I would just immediately go into like protection mode for my students. I would open the door and I would see whoever was in the hallway and I'd be like, are you okay? Are you okay? Do you want to come in here and sit down and calm down? But for me at school, when the fire alarm goes off, it's an expected thing. So it wouldn't bother me. The fact that it went off in my apartment and it was unexpected scared me. And I had some trouble with it. So the PTSD thing was told, like, I think I was told I had PTSD the first month that I was in therapy, and I was like, no, I don't have that. They're like, you do. You do. Yeah.
I think it's different because when you're in school, you also have a different role and you have to protect the kids. So maybe your brain is telling you have to stay calm because you're also responsible for them. But in your house is different because you're by yourself and I don't know. And it's different. For example, me, everyone is telling me, oh my God, I wish I was like you never stress, you're so calm. I'm like, you don't know me. I'm in stress the whole time. That's why when there's a stressful situation, there's no change. That's why you don't understand. When I'm with people and there's like something going on and everyone is panicking around me, I feel like I have to be the calm one in order to do something and take action and protect them. But when I'm by myself, like maybe later, maybe the stressful event is over and everyone is okay. But when I go back, that's when I stress, which is weird. But it's like my feelings are inside and then in the right moment, I release them.
Right. And for me, it wasn't like a conscious decision that I made. It wasn't, I need to be strong for the kids. It was survival mode, which we've heard fight, flight response. And mine was like to protect. It wasn't really my purpose wasn't to protect. It was just how I responded. I swear I could hear like a pin drop. My pupils were dilated. I was so aware of every sound, every sight. I was aware of everything, and I was put into protect mode. I wouldn't have said like, oh, if this had ever happened, I'd be the one to remain calm and to make sure that everyone is doing okay. I mean, we can't know what we do in that situation. We know that like police officers go through training to handle situations like that. Teachers don't have any training for that necessarily, but now we have training for like active shooter drills. It doesn't train you to override your body's system of survival mode. That's whatever your body chooses at that point. So if you could take a big brawny man and he could be the one that's running out the door to protect himself. You don't know. So it's very weird what your brain chooses to do in that situation. And luckily my kids were doing very well in the room considering what was going on, but they just kind of sat there quietly and they were texting, and it all, I look at it now, like I can look back on the day and analyze everything, but I really think that in most situations of my life, I am the calm one and I don't express those outward emotions all the time. So it is like right on track. And I've been talking to my therapist who is asking me how I'm doing in this quarantine thing. And I'm like, I'm so calm. Like this is not affecting me at all. And she said it was because like you're used to these chaotic moments and you're calm throughout them. And I was like, oh, that's not good. I'm so used to chaos that this is not a problem to be thrown into something like this.
You're like this meme where the room is burning and there's this dog who's like, it's fine. I was like, that's exactly that.
Yeah, I posted something about it recently, actually. I usually, when I Zoom my kids, I have the fire in the background that I'm like, this is fine.
That's me.
But it is, and there's been a lot of studies to show that people that are constantly in chaotic households or chaotic environments are just calm because they live in chaos.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've been through fire, everything else is like.
Exactly.